transition and everything.
The music's still flowing.
Oh gosh,
yeah. Don't you love the music?
I've heard it, and it is fantastic.
We have production problems with the music, but hey, things are getting better here at the Dakota, right. And today specifically they're getting better because we're joined by Travis Zablotney.
We are.
Oh boy.
Yes.
That's a compliment.
You are and this doesn't matter, this is not the reason why we had you on, but you are the district chair for District 5, right?
Correct, yeah.
I had it right.
I'm also the Northwest Region chair, actually. So
okay.
Perfect. Me to serve on the executive committee for the NDGOP. So
very good. And then we were talking beforehand, and you're also on a local board?
I'm on the Ward County Water Resource Board as well, yeah.
So you're involved in a couple things.
Yeah, one time I had the unfortunate opportunity of showing up to a meeting and speaking up, and was asked to be on the Planning Commission. That's where it all started.
Yeah.
So I was on the City of Minot Planning Commission, and I don't know, it started to become more politically aware and active, and like to pay attention to what's going on, not just specific things, but city council, school board, state Republican politics, and
that's important. It's important to be involved. That's something that came up a few years ago, coming out of COVID. People were like, all right, finally we got to get involved, guys. We got to do something. And it doesn't, I'm a believer. Now, obviously people that have listened to me know that I'm probably more conservative, but I don't care who you are. I think you should just be involved and let it be. I think that's important.
Absolutely, yeah, and you're right. I think what we experienced with lockdowns and things that didn't just feel right during COVID really brought us off the chair and got us up doing things, and myself included in that. I was active prior to that, but not nearly as much as now. So.
Right. So you have had the opportunity to work with the city in a few different things, and so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on. We're going to talk about our schedule today to the viewers. Is we're going to talk about city council last night, and then we're going to also kind of talk about how it's been going. It's time for a grade on city council. They've been there for about 4 or 5 months now. They should be getting comfortable with things.
Starting to get into a good flow of things here. You're starting to see some vote changes. There's not just 3-4, 4-3 votes anymore.
Right.
People are crossing over.
Comfortability growing.
Without a doubt.
And then you specifically had something where you were a part of that Northern Plains ag group that had some interesting interactions with the city, so we can talk about that. And then we have some other things too that we might get to. So exciting show today.
I'm looking forward to it. Travis, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. All right, so let's start with city council last night. You were there, Kyler. Break it down.
It was a brisk, fast-paced city council meeting, especially compared to what we've had the last few weeks. 2 weeks ago, we went from almost a 5-hour meeting to about an hour and a half last night. It was
crazy.
Exactly. It blew by. Few interesting things happened. There wasn't a ton on the agenda last night. There was a lot of planning commission things that we were talking about. We went over, and I'm sure you have a lot of background information or knowledge on a lot of those things, especially being on the planning commission formerly. One of the more interesting things I thought was a little more later on. So I guess before we get to that too, they went through the consent items. They brought 4 things up. One of the interesting ones they brought up, Tom Ross, actually from last meeting, Mike Blessum motioned to start a new committee.
Right.
On the Minot Chamber, on economic development in Minot. And Tom Ross announced some of the appointments on it, and they went through them. Jonathan, I think you might know where I'm going here. One friend of the show that requested to be on there was noticeably not on.
Leif Schneider did not make it.
Unfortunately, they didn't have Leif, but it did include a very good board of people. I think they put together a good thing. It's Mike Bless and Paul Pittner both got on. Then Melinda Howe, Justin Hammer, Tyler Neither, Jordan Nelson, and then they originally had Mark Lyman on, but then last night they switched it over to Beth Feldner, who's
Mayor was ready.
Yeah, he was.
Because Blessing was like, maybe we should look at changing this, and he was like, all right, have
he had a name ready. He was
it's
good
always
to go
interesting
on
when
that.
there's a name ready.
Exactly.
You always wonder why there was a name ready.
Huh.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Right.
It always does spark a little interest with that.
Right. Yeah.
Other than that, there was...
Okay. I'm going to talk about...
Yes.
Not on that, but I'm going to go to the land. And we were talking beforehand, and we don't have to have the same discussion we had beforehand, but it was I was not expecting... Honestly, did not realize that was just going to be a done deal. I was anticipating there to be a second round on that. Seems like there's normally always 2 rounds on everything. I was expecting there to be a second round of discussion stuff on it. And
with the Mickelson land lease.
Mickelson land lease.
2 weeks ago got pushed ahead to now effectively.
And it's good. It's good that these things are coming up, because what we're finding is that there's these 5-10 year agreements that are just auto renew, that just are endless. And there's councils like the one that we have now, almost, that most of them know nothing about it. They don't know why it's in place. They don't know how it's in place. They don't know anything.
But it's there.
It's there. And the natural thing is like, well, if it was good 10 years ago, then it's probably good now. Let's just keep it going. It's good that there's conversations happening on these to potentially shorten them, and make sure that there's more accountability that's happening with them.
Yeah. Well, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but one of the things that, that really stands out about the council today is different than prior. And I'm going to say this about the council, but it applies to almost every board I've ever witnessed. When you get people on that are finally willing to ask questions and not just go along with the administration or the city manager or whatever and just nod and shake their head. And part of the reason the meetings are getting longer is why we're actually doing business.
And that's one thing. Like 2 weeks ago, it was a 5-hour meeting, but a lot happened in that 5 hours. Right. I mean, there was a lot going on. Great, like you've mentioned, great questions were being presented and asked. And I think it rubs off on other people. When you start asking, poking, and prodding a little bit, I think others are more inclined to start doing the same.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get good dialogue. You start to make better decisions. It isn't just a nod your head, show up and leave, and know, same old. And that's why we are seeing changes, because we've got a few council members willing to ask the questions that need to be asked. And as you know, that last prior meeting, I think one of them was being chastised because he's asking staff questions.
Yeah.
Was accused of undressing him. The reality was he was just trying to get to the bottom of what was going on. So.
Right. Yeah. It's good points. And there's the adjustment that's being made by the city. We've talked about it before, but the city staff, the way that they go to council is different than it happened in June and July. And the circumstance that I point to most often is one that we have talked about often, and that was when Sorensen went there with the Kemper property. And there was an expectation, it felt like, on Sorensen's end, that this was just going to be approved. It's going to be good to go. You don't really have to bring much. Council, if we say it's good, council is going to say it's good. And it just so happened that there were one short. Council was one member short, and so it didn't get through. Yep. Who knows how that person would have voted, but it didn't get through on a tie vote. Well. And then when it came back, there was more conversation that had, but there was an actual presentation. Yep. Still, personally, it wasn't to the level that I would like.
And now it's a whole different line of...
It's all increased since then.
Yep. And there's a whole different line of reasoning that came in with that presentation, too.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
That was the very... Yeah.
However... All of a sudden we needed a reason.
All of a sudden we needed... So we came up with one.
I just feel like had that... I think we've hashed this out before, but had that presentation been brought up the first time, I feel like a lot of this wouldn't have been to the degree it came to.
Right? No, in that situation specifically, correct.
Yep.
But yeah, that question really is a deal of like how is Minot ran, and I think it actually transitions to something that we want to talk to you about. There's not much to talk about last night's city council, honestly, guys. So you were part of the Northern Plains Ag Group. Yeah. You did some representation. I don't know if you actually represented them, but you did some representation at the Planning Commission, and then when it actually came to the city council. And there was something that said, and you let Northern Plains Ag, the members there, go and talk about it more, but about them getting told, maybe you guys should just develop out of town. And I know that that's since been addressed. That's what the city said at the dais that day when it was mentioned. But like, how does something like that come about? Can you give us some backstory on that?
Well, give you quite a bit of background. First off, we used to own the dealership that was Magic City Implement. That's now Plains Ag or Northern Plains in Minot. We own the property that they reside in currently that's been too small forever and ever. And they've come to the simple fact they need to build. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we had purchased some property pre-flood that, in the back of our minds when we still own the dealership, that might be a good place to develop. Still own it. Still a good place.
Right.
So when they started having serious conversations about this. Of course, we suggested they take a look at this property, and they did. So this whole process started probably over a year ago with the city.
Sure.
They went into the city to have conversations about, okay, we need 20 acres of land on highway frontage, good exposure, easy to get, machinery in and out, water, city water and sewer. So you start looking around the city to try to find where there's property that meets those requirements.
Right.
It doesn't
Lo and behold.
exist very easily or very well, all of that criteria. And so they were doing that, in that process, they determined that the property that we own had at some point in time, which I still contend this is not right, but was zoned gateway commercial or C2, and now gateway commercial through the long range plan.
Okay.
And what they told them is that, well, under that zoning, which by the way, an implement dealership should be an M1 zoning,
Okay.
requires that you pave the entire lot, not just your customer parking area, but where all your machinery is at and all, the whole 9 yards. And it's like,
all of a sudden that's a lot of pavement.
we can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
We already have a huge investment. Plus, it's not functional.
Yeah.
To have machinery on,
it's not
That
practical.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And
It's
by
gonna
the way,
break down fast.
show me an implement dealership in town that has that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they were fighting them on that. And they said, well, and they did go at that time and make a text amendment saying that, okay, you can go to this zoning and not have to pave that property. So they did make a move there. But in the same time, they were not willing to change the zoning, and they wanted it to stay with C2, and they'd give them a conditional use permit.
Okay.
The conditional use permit, the problem with that is that if they ever want to sell that property for something other than an implement dealership, they can't. It's got to fit in the C2 zone.
So that you're so limited
So
at
you're
that
either
point.
implement dealership or less,
Yeah.
and you just limit your ability to sell. And that's not their intention, but who knows what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So in that process as well, they said, well, if it doesn't work for you, there's Surrey is only a half a mile down the road. Maybe you want to check them out. Well, Surrey doesn't have water and sewer and, the needs that they needed. And literally this was the planning manager.
Okay.
The right term out here.
Sure.
For Minot at the time, who is now above all the planning because of the 50,000 population. There's a regional planner.
Yep.
So he was the one that told him that. And then, of course, when we went in with the current planner and had conversations with him, he was not going to budge on that deal. No, this is the way it is. We have a long-range plan that we've spent time in, and, of course, we're not going to be able to change that. This is what you're going to have to take. Right up to the minute of the first planning commission meeting, he came in and said, hey, you want to cut a deal? We can make this thing, you can fast-track this, get this done. You guys just need to take a conditional use permit. And like, no. We're not doing that.
Especially now.
It doesn't work in this investment. So
right.
he was, and every time I'd have a conversation, it was the same thing. No, we just can't do it. Can't do it. We got this long range plan. And I said, well, you know what? I've been on the planning commission. And I understand a couple things. One, we went through that process when I was there. It's a group of people listening to an outside consultant that's been paid to draw a pretty map with pretty colors and suggest what might work in areas. And in the large perspective, it's probably very accurate.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you get down to individual parcels and you start looking at the real function of how this property might work.
That's where there's a lot more openness to ambiguity in there.
Yeah. It's not absolute. And they were treating it as if it was absolute. So, we talk about the difficulty of working with the city. That has been, and I, since Planning Commission on, and I've, had a lot of conversations with contractors. It's never how do we get this done and what makes sense. It's this is the rule. We can't change it.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm the current planning director's favorite guy because I did say that, no, we're just going to take this and, see if we can let, rational minds prevail here.
Sure.
And
right.
Take this
in
up
the
a
end,
notch.
what did they do? When the Planning Commission saw that this made sense, that it's M1 zoning because everything else out there pretty much is.
Yeah.
Then they voted to support that. What they ultimately decided to do, I think we just need to change the long-range plan
Right.
to make it fit what actually should be there, and that's what they did. So they got that figured out. There was one other place I was going to go with that. Okay, now it ran out of my brain.
Oh, it
This
happens.
though, it felt like
Every day.
in that sequence of events there that the city planner got very protective, and I understand. Like I'm not trying to take a dig at him, but I think it's something that happens
When you're
in the
so
city.
invested in something and you put and spend so much time into it, it becomes your baby. And then someone wants to change it
Right.
a little bit, whether it's for the better or not. All of a sudden, it just adds that extra layer of
But
a wall up.
you hear of inspectors doing the same thing,
Sure.
where they lose the reasonability to the situation.
Sure.
And they say, no, you're going to have to do this. Well, nobody else has to do this. Yeah, but we've had this experience to this point, so now you have to do that. It's like, whoa. And like,
becomes
we're
subjective.
supposed to be fighting for the same goal here. This is not a deal where I'm a citizen, so I'm against the city.
Yep.
It is, I'm a citizen, you're helping me. Together, we get to make Minot into a great, thriving community. That's like the long range goal here.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's lost, I think.
Well, and on that vein, I guess I want to convey something else, and that I'm not opposed to zoning standards at all.
Right.
Sure.
And you know, I was happier than heck that it was gateway commercial, because I'd love nothing more than to see a Costco or a Sam's Club come in there. But
course.
the reality is that's likely not where they're going to want to
If
go.
they come in,
because
that's
of the
not
city
gonna-
itself at this point.
But with that being said, my suggestion at city planning was let's create gateway industrial. Let's have higher standards for that corridor, because we absolutely need them. You know, I think economic development in Minot is more about what we look like, how we appear to the public when they motor in, back when the oil boom was happening, when the executive and his wife and kids were coming to town, they wanted a place that
looked
looked
presentable.
good. Yeah.
It's
Right.
the optics of it.
And so I went, you know, with that suggestion, they kind of took it to heart. I think maybe something will happen, but you know, even with that, I told the planning director, I said, look, I'm not advocating for lower standards. As a matter of fact, I want the rest of our property to retain value, which means I want things to look good and clean. So let's make sure that happens.
Right.
And it didn't seem like that was really what he was driving for, you know, which should have been.
Yep.
And I hope that they hold that up. But
Right. That's hard. It's hard. Interesting deal. So this is a question that I have, and I've asked a few people, and I would love to get your perspective on it. Is Minot, and we reframed the question a little bit in our prep, but is Minot as open to development as they claim to be?
Well, you always get two sides of that story, right?
For
you
sure.
get the administrative block that, no, they're not. They definitely inhibit things. It's been 5 or 6 years ago, but just to give you an example, I had a company called Rosen's that is a large Midwest farm chemical product distributor that wanted to build in this area.
Okay.
They went into the city of Minot planning department and left so disgusted. They were working with Rolac Contracting at the time.
Didn't even want.
That he said, you know what, we got to find a place outside the city limits, because I'm just not going to deal with this. Sure. And so they had called and asked if we had property, and we do. That would work, but at the end of the day, they went to Berthold. They left town.
Just went.
So,
Yep.
I mean, and I think that still exists today, and it's more about the attitude of how do we make what needs to work for you and us, and get this project done. Then no, this is our guide, and if you can't, you know,
Right.
if you can't meet it, you're out.
And so, yeah, because I think sometimes we hear, well, you talk with the people that economic development and stuff like that, obviously they're going to be, we're open. These are our metrics.
Yep.
These are the businesses that can come. We're ready to go. And I don't think it probably affects franchises to a point, because that's a lot of times the businesses that you hear about when you talk with economic development, but it's places like that, that's probably not a franchise. It could be just a North Dakota branch that it's really just family-owned business that they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into this thing to make it happen, and they're just trying to expand. They're trying to go to a new market.
Just trying to turn it into a regional brand at that point.
Right. Yeah. However, their growth pattern is working. And what are the blocks, though, that they hit? Like for the Northern Plains Ags, it's go build somewhere else because we don't want to deal with the headache. Is it something where you feel like it ties back to people trying to protect businesses that are already in Minot and don't want to allow the competition to flourish? Or do you feel like it's just people that look at the rules and are not willing to bend and maybe even pull them a little tighter than they should be sometimes?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question because we've been through
maybe
a
it's
number
unfair
of planners over the time frame and different people, and it's almost like it's a culture. Almost like a city culture that,
you're right.
You know, and one other comment which will accentuate this. When the individual that is responsible for Northern Plains building projects came to the first planner, he told him, he said, well, I know you've developed property all over the state. Yeah. But you're in Minot now. Literally, he told him, you're in Minot now. So the expectation was that don't think it's going to be easy. So what is that? I mean, that to me is culture. But the other thing I was going to bring to a point was when we talk about standards, you know, part of the difficulty that we got to be careful not to mix in is the resistance that some developers might have to actually meeting some standards, like whether it's landscaping or things of that nature. I mean, I know there's been a ton of pushback, and when I was on planning, I was for that stuff. I mean, back to the livability, right?
Of course.
Why do people, you know, I've said this myself, if there was a high-speed train to Bismarck, I'd live there. Because I like how the community looks and functions more so than I do here right now. This is my home. I'm a farmer. I'm stuck here.
Little committed at this point.
But we need, you know, we need something different than Concrete Alley on Broadway to make the town more appealing.
No, that's good.
More livable. And to me, if you do that, people want to come. And when people want to come, guess what? Then there's a demand. There's people to work. We can create businesses. We can grow our economy because it's people that grow the economy.
Yeah,
we can get that Chick-fil-A.
If we don't have them, it doesn't matter how many businesses come.
They
won't survive.
Because where are you going to find your workers? Where's your labor supply at that point?
And it'll be interesting when this Project Sentinel happens to see how some of that stuff is managed. When there's a forced growth in Minot, we were talking about it with Councilman Rob Fuller on his podcast. Let's talk about it, Minot, and 3,000 to 5,000 people coming in. Minot could be much more than that. Just depends. And what happens after Project Sentinel is over? Do they stay? Whatever. What you're talking about is a difference. It would be a terrible thing for them to be like, love North Dakota. Minot wasn't the place, but we would, when on weekends we got the chance to go to Bismarck, I can find a place down there and it'd be perfect. That'd be a bummer. It'd be a bummer for stuff like that to happen.
Well, in the reality of projects like that, I think it's no different than the oil field.
There's booms and busts.
There's as many negatives as positives to that. We're going to see economic growth, but at the same time, it's going to impact people negatively from the standpoint that rents go up and resources become more scarce and prices of everything go up because we don't have enough people to work.
It's true.
So there'll be challenges to it. It's unavoidable. It's got to happen.
Yeah, right. You worry about the bus. You don't necessarily want to build all the infrastructure that it takes to meet it. It's just going to be a tough few years.
You have the bus service, but not necessarily good bus stops for it.
Yeah, well, Minot figured out the bus situation, right? And they were talking about getting a new bus, so maybe it'll all work out.
Something like that.
With the Northern Plains Ag, you guys were able to get it through City Council, through the Planning Commission and City Council, and is it still good for a November closing? How's it going? Has it been going good since then?
Yeah, everything is moving forward, and they're intending to. They're working on their plans with their engineers, and so we will have a new facility eventually out on Highway 2 East. So
that's exciting.
Fantastic.
See, that's neat. It's neat because it's right on the edge of town, and it kind of, when you get those things, it sets a marker of
better
this is
boundary.
where Minot's at, right?
Yeah.
When you hit Northern Plains Ag, whatever, you're in Minot, which will be kind of neat between us and Surrey because you don't have that right now. You go till you get to that cross leg. If you're going to go down Burdick or whatever, and you're in Minot, I mean, it's really 55th Street crossing is probably more, but still, you don't really have that firm on the edge of town.
Commercial feeling.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's in Minot anymore at that point.
Right. Very interesting. Okay, so next topic, and that is this. You worked with City Council. You've monitored City Council. We've monitored it. Kyler's monitored it.
A little bit.
How is the City Council doing? The election was in June.
June started July.
Yep. So it's been about 4 or 5 months. How have they been doing? How are we liking the new look City Council? Well, you can lead.
Okay. Well, I complimented them at one of the budget hearing meetings.
Yeah, you did.
As very productive. It's actually beyond my expectations of what could happen when 3 new minds are elected, and they're willing to start to ask questions and challenge the status quo and so on. And it's been interesting because as you mentioned earlier, you watch the votes. It's not just what we thought it was going to be, a 3-4, split.
Yeah.
Right.
One way or the other. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we are seeing people thinking more when they hear the questions. We're seeing, all different members, including the mayor, vote in ways that I didn't expect they would.
Right.
I thought it would just be polarized but when you actually get the conversation, you ask the questions. It's not just let's ram this agenda through and get the meeting done. It's interesting how we have a different council in entirety, and they're doing good work. I'm very impressed with what's going on.
Yeah. See, talking about questions, it was interesting because coming out of campaign season, it was like these meetings are too long. That was said, or at least alluded to. And you're like, okay, it's going to be interesting to see when we get the new look council, what's going to happen here. And so new look council gets in place and they're like, all right, we're sorry. These meetings are long right now. They're going to get shortened. And then there was a turn. And I was like, no, they probably won't get shorter.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is we're now having discussion that's important.
Yep.
And we're not willing to sacrifice that. And I think that's really good. The discussion that's happening is something that I'm thankful for. It's not, there was for a time, and it's not probably every council has things that are good for that time. Okay. So I'm not trying to fire shots, and that's not the point of this, but there is comparison that happens. And there were city council meetings that I would watch, and it was the city would go to the council and say, we need this. And city council would just be like, all right, yeah. And what else do you need on top of that almost? And it was like, okay, I don't think that's great. There should be, like, whenever you go into your boss's office, you should be scared, right?
At least a little
there should
bit.
be a respect. Scared is the wrong word. There should be a respect.
That's
though,
fair.
Right? When you're going and asking for money, when you're asking for approval on this stuff, there should be a respect where you do take the time to get the presentation together. You make sure that, hey, this is and if we don't do it, if you don't fund it, then this is our alternative, whether that's a good alternative or a bad alternative. You should have that full picture.
Yep.
And then there's a quality decision that can be made, and you're now seeing that happen, and I'm happy about that too.
Without a doubt. It's good, relevant discussion. They're getting depth to questions. They're not asking questions for the sake of asking questions.
No.
It's good quality conversation that's been happening lately.
Well, and I think the citizens of Minot, hopefully those that are paying attention, and even those that aren't, should feel like they're being represented for once.
Right.
That, the dollars that they're moving into that city are actually being challenged as to how we're spending them and what we're doing. And, one of the biggest things that are moving right now, and we saw some of it last night, is this whole notion of how much reserve that we can hold. You know? And most of us, including myself, up until the start of this new commission or council, didn't realize what was going on.
Yeah.
And how many dollars we were packing away that would give us the ability to spend on $1 million land that we didn't need, whether it's landfill land or whether it was over by the Public Works building, or tons of the other projects that go on that we're bailing out, which will probably end up bailing out the Big M building in the end here.
Yeah.
Of a couple $1 million on our back. But those are the kind of things that are really easy to do when the pot's plumb full.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And people don't know how the money's getting there.
Absolutely. No, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. When you got money, it's easy to spend it.
It is, especially when your reserves are full.
Yeah. And early on, one of the councilmen said, whenever you make $1 million purchase, it's not something that should be something you can do without thinking. Like, there should be a lot of thought put into $1 million purchase.
Without a doubt.
I mean, unless if you're Elon Musk and you're giving him out $1 million for people to sign a petition to support the Constitution.
A little different,
Then it's $1 billion.
Then it's $1 billion. Yeah. There's some scale that you should have to think about it.
Yeah.
Very interesting there. Yeah, no, I think I'm excited for the new look council. There was a direction I was going to go and escape. So we've seen good change happen with the council so far, but do we think we need to see more? Are they on the right path, or are there more changes that need to happen?
Well, they are on the right path, and you can only get so much done in a short period of time. And I think the last 4 months we've seen the movement, tremendous movement. And so the other thing is that I think as time goes on, as these council members are together for the next 3 years or 2 years at least, there'll be entirely new things that will be brought up that just weren't quite ready to be talked about right now.
Sure.
So we're on the right track, and you can only do so much so fast. And I think that we should expect to see good things continuing.
That's good.
So one of the citizens brought up yesterday to Scott Samuelson, Councilman Samuelson, about him calling out the Minot Chamber EDC and said, well, I feel like that was you campaigning for Measure 4 or advocating for Measure 4. First off, let's go through layers here. What did you think about it when Scott brought that up? To defund the Chamber EDC out of left field. But.
So here's the long and short of it. I don't care what measure it is, whether you're for or against it. Today, it could be any other measure that this goes on, and you may not be for property tax today and think that he was wrong about this, but tomorrow there'll be a measure that you're for, and maybe this bureaucracy is not. And they come out and spend taxpayer dollars, which is strictly prohibited in the Century Code. And they're doing it, under the guise. And so I brought this up at a water board meeting. We had the same thing happening with the State Water Users Association. Came out strongly against Measure 4. They're a part of the Kill group. Kill North, Kill
Keep
ND.
it local. Kill ND. Keep it local ND.
And I just said, this is wrong, guys, on this Ward County Water Board, and we're giving that group money as well. And they are violating, the law. And our engineer, I think, is a part of that State Water Users Board, and he says, well, let me tell you what, our attorney told us that as so long as we have revenues that are coming in from membership that aren't taxpayer dollars, we can do this.
They can justify it.
We can sneak this through. And I said, okay, fine. I want to see an audit. I want to see that you don't commingle those funds. I want to see that you didn't spend $1 of taxpayer money, and of course that's never going to happen likely. And so they just do it because they can get by with it. And so him calling her out is absolutely what needs to happen, on top of the fact that we're one of the few chambers in EDC that actually gave money in this effort. And Scott, is he lobbying for it? The guy and his family and friends worked their butts off to get it on the measure, to make it an opportunity for people to vote on.
Which, to be fair to him, he was doing that long before he was elected to city council.
Exactly.
It was before. And so PIK Dogs says, you can say that we didn't need the land by Public Works, but think about it. Would you like to spend $1 million today or $2 million in 5 years when you need it? I think the deal is we didn't need it for anything. They said they were going to need it for some overflow for their stuff. Then the next city council meeting, they said they actually needed it for the flood deal. So they didn't know what they needed it for. And now we don't know what it's going to be used for, if it's actually going to be used for what it's approved or not. So it's not about whether or not we needed it. It was about how it was done. That's where a lot of that problem lies with that specifically.
Well, I think that's a false argument, because inflation is going to happen regardless. And the dollars today are not going to be worth what, tomorrow.
It happens on both sides.
So you can say it's going to be more money in the future, so we should buy everything we can today, but you're still limited by the amount you have to spend, right? And it'll be irrelevant in the future, because you'll probably be bringing more dollars in due to inflation to pay for that $2 million.
No, that's a good point too. So Samuelson, did you feel like it was right for him, or because of how involved he's been with Measure 4? And I think it's an interesting discussion, and I like Scott. But do you feel like it was fair for him to bring that argument from the dais specifically? Or do you think it was a cross?
Absolutely, because we're talking about a violation of North Dakota Century Code by an organization that's getting funds from the city, and he's a councilman. He has every right in the world, regardless. We're not talking about whether you support the measure specifically. We're talking about the actions taken, and they can have a position on it, but they should not violate state law and use taxpayer dollars to do that.
And I don't think, when he mentioned, I didn't watch it back, so I could be off, and I should watch it back between now and Thursday. But I don't think he mentioned that he was for it. Was never about for or against Measure 4. It was about the fact that they were just supporting a measure. That's where it was. And it happened to be Measure 4, and so consequently, the Minot Chamber EDC gave free advertisement for Measure 4 from the dais simply by them supporting it.
Yeah.
That would be more, if it's never happened, it would have never been brought up there.
Well, and I would challenge anybody that has any issue with that is to go read the Century Code in 16.1 on corrupt practices. It specifically calls out, you know, the ability, you should not be using taxpayer funds to support for or against any sort of initiated measure.
Yeah.
So is that okay?
Right. No, that part is not okay.
That would be the question I have. Yeah. That's what was being challenged.
Right. Yeah. And that is not an okay thing that happened there. So interesting deal there. I think I don't think Samuelson needed a rebuttal to it, but hey, I think I'm just happy anytime that citizens speak up.
Yeah, I know. I love when someone goes up.
So I think that's a good thing. It's something that takes bravery. I know the resident that did speak up has spoken up about other things before, but it takes. So I think it's just good for conversation to be happening in Minot. So from that perspective, I think it's a win.
Well, and I think the other thing it brought to light is that because the question was asked specifically, did the members of the chamber, did they get a chance to weigh in on this and say where they were at? And you know, the question was answered indirectly.
It was.
No, the board made this decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what about the members? What do they think?
It's a very select.
Well, how is that board elected? Oh, we have a nominating committee and we pick who gets
closed.
to run. So it's like it's not an open election. So it's flawed that way. And it was good conversation.
It is. And if the chamber's upset about it, it's not the current leadership's, well, from a leadership standpoint, it's not their fault. They may have been involved in other areas at the time. But when you bring the chamber EDC together, that's where the problem began, is it probably limited their ability to input and stuff like this, and that probably wasn't looked at when it happened.
Correct.
So if the EDC would have stayed separate, then chamber might have had more flexibility in those situations. But
here we are.
But yeah, here we are. Yep.
No, without a doubt.
So I guess one of the things that were brought up, and we have a comment again there, I'm just catching the top part of it, but if the chamber EDC is not a part of the city of Minot, if it was dissolved, where would the money go in their bank account? The money that they got from the city?
That's a good question.
Would it go to private individuals, or would it end up going back to the city?
Right, yeah.
Would they have to pay it back, or would the city just have to write it off as a...
No, but what he's saying is, where would it go, period?
Oh, just in general. Yeah.
Like, is it going to go all to its members? Is it going to go to a private individual? Is it going to go to the city?
Yeah.
Where does that money go? Because that's
end?
Where you find who's the owner of it.
Yeah, quote unquote, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So interesting stuff there. All right, let's go through some measures. We're getting close to time for an ad, but let's go through some measures. We'll kick it off with Measure 4. All right, so I've come out and said, yeah, I'm going to vote for it. But I'll say this. I am not a fan of Measure 4 of how it's written. I'm a fan of the principles. I'm not a fan of how it's written. I'm not a fan of how it's would be applied. But the conversations that I have with people, legislatures, is that if it's not close, then the legislature may just ignore property tax in the session because the people spoke through how they vote, which is, in my opinion, is a completely unfair thing, because if people vote based off of how they want to see property tax fixed, they could vote no. Mm-hmm. But the legislature will only take action if they show some type, depending on their approval of Measure 4. I think that's a little bit flawed, but I know that you view Measure 4 differently probably than me still. So I'd love to hear your take on Measure 4.
Well, the legislature has demonstrated that they do not have the will or the ability to deal with this. And so quite honestly, when you're writing a constitutional measure, you can't write in all the details to it. We're just simply saying ad valorem property tax is not acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're voting on, whether that's acceptable. It doesn't mean that taxes aren't going to exist.
Right.
They just have to exist in some other form.
Right.
I think that, I'm not sure what your concerns have been with that measure, and maybe a lot of it was about, well, there's no guidance. We hear it constantly in the propaganda. There's no plan.
Yeah.
With purposely, there's no plan. Why? How do you keep it local if we write in the Constitution or have the state
dictate it all?
The political subdivisions how they have to generate the revenue? It's no longer local.
Right.
And a ton of that's going on right now regardless, but if you really want it that way, then we can't write a plan. We just have to get rid of that method We're starting from scratch. I know that I think the biggest concern that political subdivisions have, because we had a small meeting of city, county, park, township here this last fall, when they really understood what was going on, is the work that's going to be involved to figure this out, number one. And number two, they don't want to have to go to the taxpayer and ask for approval.
Gotcha.
Because they're afraid they know what the answer is going to be on so many things that they've been easily willing,
right.
They try to get
spend on.
Yeah.
Now there'll be a pendulum here, right? If it would pass, to where there are going to be services that aren't occurring that people were expecting to occur, and they voted against them, right? So there'll have to be a balance in time. But property tax and the system wasn't developed overnight, and I don't think going forward will be any different. What you have to decide is whether or not it's a fair way to tax, and whether people should never be entitled to own their property.
I don't have concerns of whether my fire, I'm still going to have fire, police,
emergency services.
Yeah, all those things. I don't have concerns about that. I think probably the biggest frustration with Measure 4 is the fact that businesses get off the hook the same. I think it'd be fair to still have a form of tax on businesses, and I understand that there still could be taxes enforced, and they could go back and even enforce some on businesses after the fact potentially. But I think that would probably be the biggest deal. If it was just a homestead deal, I would be way more comfortable with it.
But hang on here.
Okay.
We're assuming businesses are going to get away without paying taxes. How is government going to be funded, and how is it funded presently? It's on the backs
on the people
of businesses.
Yeah.
For the most part, we talk about all these corporate breaks that are going to happen. Where in the world does the $21 billion come that the state gets?
Yeah,
sure.
They're not in business to create it. They're getting it from somewhere, and they'll advocate the majority is the same people they're saying that are going to get the breaks.
Yeah.
And by the way, when we go forward, we're all still paying taxes.
And
It's not that taxes are going away. There's no magic button that there's not going to be taxes anymore, but there's going to be a different process and a different method.
I think that the name unfair property tax was probably a good name that was chosen, but I think the bad part of it is it intentionally, I think you can say intentionally, gives off the perception that property tax is going away. And that's not necessarily true. What the measure and what they're saying is that assessed value is an unfair way to tax, and we need to change that taxing figure, whatever. And so that's what needs to be changed. It is probably if you boil down what Measure 4 is just trying to get rid of assessed. That's the biggest deal.
And as a farmer, I don't expect that I'm not going to be taxed in some way based on what I own.
Right.
Because from a township standpoint, I got to have roads. I need to get my machinery, my trucks to my fields, and I need that service.
Yeah.
And it will likely have to be taxed on some basis of the property I own, whether it's per acre or per mile or whatever.
It has to come some way still.
And it's still going to be based on that, but not in the way that it is today, that for most people, they don't even understand
Hopefully
a mill, and they don't understand.
No, they don't.
The valuation process and how this all works.
You say most people, and that's not even a knock on citizens, because most people at the dais don't know what
exactly. I mean, we've spent
across the board.
We've seen in Bismarck how the county commission, the Burley County Commission, did not raise mills and did not understand how people's property tax still went up. This is legitimate.
Gotcha. Yeah,
they didn't understand that the assessor assessed property and values went up.
Gotcha.
So even though we're getting the question, they didn't comprehend how that happened.
So even though the mill rate stayed the same, all the property's values went up, so they're still getting more taxes from them.
Lakefield did a great job of explaining how it worked, is that it's not even about the mills from the city side. Yeah. It's about the amount of property tax they request, and then the mills are determined. Yeah. We got, I don't know how to say your handle, so I apologize if I'm butchering it every time, but PIK Dogs. We have no idea what will happen if Measure 4 happens, as the saying goes, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I mean, it's an argument. I don't know that I agree with it, because, I mean, that's part of what happens with elections. You don't know what you're getting. Yeah. Deanne Regaldo says if the businesses pay the taxes, they charge us by charging more for what they sell. So the businesses don't pay the tax, they will charge less for what they sell. That's an argument that's also being used for renting, and I don't know that I agree with that, because I think that I don't know how it'll affect businesses. I really don't think it'll affect businesses. But for renting, I don't think people are going to lower their rent. Do you think so?
It depends on what the market forces are.
Yeah,
Sure.
The market over time could force it, but I don't think in
Immediately
3 months you're going to see people drop $600 off your rent.
And that argument as well is that, I would say, do you not think you're not paying those taxes for what you buy today? The taxes that businesses charge, I don't care what form they're in, have to be covered, and that business still wants to make a profit.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a false argument again to say that, well, if we change from this type to that type, they're going to get charged. They're being charged today. Rents, as far as rents go, one of the things you got to think about is properties may get improved, because before they weren't improving them because they'd have to force a valuation increase, which would force the owner to increase the rents to cover that.
Good point.
And so they haven't been making improvements. So we should see some of that come right away, in my opinion. Will we see an immediate deduction? Absolutely not.
Right.
But, there's going to be competitive forces that drive that one way or the other.
Right.
And when that expense doesn't exist, there will be changes in time.
So then, talking about the rental market, do you foresee a lot of outside investors, outside of the state investors, coming out and buying a property?
Yeah. Could this help incentivize that to happen?
No, because
bad incentive,
we all are on the same playing field when this changes.
Okay. Yeah.
The argument that out-of-state landowners are going to come in and buy the land now because they don't have to pay property tax. Well, guess what? I don't either.
Exactly.
And I'm the same guy that may compete with out-of-state landowners for farmland today, and I'll be the same guy tomorrow, and we're still on the same level playing field.
Bill Gates wanted to buy no matter what. He wasn't asking about property taxes.
He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He can afford any of that.
The competitive aspect of that, it may be a better deal for them than in some other state, but you still have the competitors right here at home that are going to, compete with them. Now, are there more? Maybe. I don't know.
Right. Angel Dog 4 says, I've talked to my landlord. She's already said she'll be lowering our rent. They can do improvements too. Hey, I think that's great. You got probably a good landlord. I think if you have private landlords, there's probably a greater chance of rents decreasing. But if you don't have a private landlord, I think it's very low.
Maybe don't expect it. Maybe you can hope it won't go up.
Yeah,
but at the same time, maybe don't expect
it could slow increases. Yeah, for sure. Interesting discussions. One more measure. I think measure what we have at measure 2. Is that the other one that we were going to talk about? Measure 2, which changes to initiated measures. I think I know where you stand on that. Measure 5, though, marijuana. That one's an interesting one to me, because I'm hearing a lot of conservatives before it this time around, which that isn't always the case, but North Dakota is an interesting conservative market because they're very libertarian conservative, which marijuana flies down the libertarian path. How do you feel about measure 5?
Well, there's two things that I would base non-support on it for. One would be the simple fact, if we look at other states and what they've experienced, and I know there's conversation for it saying that, well, we've got all this revenue that we can generate. Well, you're spending it all in dealing with the problems that come with it at the same time.
Right.
And so I think we can use that as an example and say, that's not really working out so well.
Sure.
The other one is, for every employer, this question has been raised. If an accident happens while a person is under the influence and you didn't know it, who's going to be responsible for that accident?
Okay.
Who's going to pay the bill?
Yeah.
Is it going to be the person that was under the influence of this now legal drug, or is it going to be the employer? And I think that's a big consideration that needs to be discussed.
Right.
I'm for liberty. I'm for government getting out of the way, but at the end of the day, I think things that have negative impacts on society, we don't need. We just don't need them, and I'm not going to support that.
Right. Makes sense.
We already have enough of those that we've approved, and I'm just not willing to.
Enough sitting around there open for people to use how they wish at this point. Yeah.
Here's a random one for you. How do you feel about seatbelts being enforced, an enforced thing?
I'm absolutely opposed to seatbelts.
Okay.
Because it's my choice.
Right.
It's my body, my choice. Whether I want to put that seatbelt on and whether I want to take the risk. And I don't, there'll be arguments that say, well, you're imposing additional cost on society by doing that. Well, I can find 10 or 100 other things that people do in their daily activities that imposes the same type of cost that they wouldn't give two thoughts about. Why we pick on seat belts, I'm not really sure.
Well, but I think one thing that's interesting to contrast the two is seat belts. The danger is a personal danger for the most part. You're not going to go in, not have your seatbelt on, and so then you lost control of your car and you hit somebody because you didn't have your seatbelt on. If you had your seatbelt on, you wouldn't have lost control of your car. Mm-hmm. That's not how that works.
Yeah. Worst case scenario.
Marijuana, yes, that is how that works. You could be on marijuana, lose control of your car, and hit somebody, and now the damage goes beyond you, and it's affecting others.
Worst case with the seatbelt one, it could. If there's someone in your car, maybe you would hurt them. That's about as far as
potential.
Yeah,
like
that's
your foot hit him in the face
because
you weren't secured,
and you get shot out.
Yeah, but most of the time the damage is going to be done to you.
Yeah,
and that's where my choice comes in because it's affecting me, whereas the other one does have the high ability to affect other people.
There's people going, well, you're not allowing me to smoke weed. It's my choice, my body. But yeah, you're making that point well. It depends on how it impacts others in society. If there's direct impacts, then we really have to think harder about it.
Right. Very good. Well, appreciate you coming on today. It's been an interesting discussion.
Yeah. Any parting words?
People need to get out and vote, but please, if you get out and vote, please understand who you're voting for. It's not a popularity contest.
Right.
For a fact.
And I see that way too often. Please understand where people stand on issues and get out and do what needs to be done and vote for your values, whatever they are. We all aren't going to agree on everything, but that would be the only thing I have that's coming up. It's consequential.
It is.
And City Council, as we talked today, is a good example of when things potentially go right. And
Yeah.
So the other thing is get involved.
Right.
I'm people like to complain about property tax, and one of the things that irritates me the most, and I've been saying it, is I don't want to hear complaints about it if you're not willing to show up at the meetings.
Yeah.
And the example that I have is the Minot public school system, who is responsible for the biggest increase in taxes that people are complaining about over the last number of years. One person showed up at their budget hearing. That's it. Yeah. So, folks, if you're tired of taxes,
if you want somewhere to complain to, there's a good.
And even just being in the room, if you're not comfortable talking about the issues, just be in the room. You get up and make a small comment about it. Whatever it is, you don't have to. You don't have to be a superstar in the deal, but just show that you care.
Show that you care. That's good. That's good. We are going to go to a 1-minute break. We have a little ad that will play, and then we'll be back after that with some hot takes and a couple other things. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes, pun intended.
All right. We are back. It was good having Travis. That was some good discussion there.
That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. PIK dog chime in, and marijuana is already legal with the doctor's note. If people want it, they can just get a doctor's note. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of that, but I think it's better that way than it just being, at least there's some process that you have to go through. There's some monitoring of it. Just like fentanyl, you can get fentanyl with the doctor's note. So,
I don't know if you can get it over the counter if you purchase it, but you're in the hospital, they're going to throw it into your system. There's no doubt about that.
So, Yeah, very interesting.
No, without a doubt. Great conversation, great topics, very insightful. He has a ton of background on a lot of these subjects.
Yeah, it's good to hear about Northern Plains Ag. You have a hot take, man. I do. You have a crazy hot take. Go with it.
I think yours is all right. So tonight, just first night, if I don't know how many sports fans we have out there, tonight's tip-off of NBA basketball. So first game is the Celtics. It's early game. They're reigning champions. They'll get crowned, get their rings, whatever. Late game, it's West Coast game. Minnesota Timberwolves, closest local team as we have, travel to the LA to play the Lakers. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers. It's going to be a good game. Obviously, we're going to see, I'm sure, Bronny James get out there just so they can.
How does the guy on the roster?
I mean, I think he'll be in the G League in about a week or two, but I think they're going to do it.
He should already be there.
Well, it doesn't start till November, but
he should still already be there.
I mean, you're not.
He should be waiting.
Yeah, he's not. He's not. He has no business on an NBA roster, but they're going to throw him out there just so he can play with LeBron, and the storyline can happen, and it can be over with. However,
it won't be over with. Anyways, proceed. It's a different discussion. It's not your hot take.
You're right. The big point, end of this game, hot take. Watch out. About 6 months from now, Lakers, Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals.
This guy, he throws this right before we get on. This is going to be my hot take. I'm like, you are out of your mind, dude.
No,
you are completely out of your mind.
Timberwolves, they were there last year.
The Timberwolves are like, we're so good, we can get rid of our best player.
Second best, Anthony Edwards is going to be the face of the league by the end of this year.
Who's the best player right now?
In the NBA?
Probably who was the best player on last year's T-Wolves team?
Anthony Edwards.
Go away.
No doubt about. Cat ain't what he used to be.
Go away.
It's a foul. He's out there flopping half the time, driving. And Anthony Edwards is the guy.
He's the future.
Yeah, he was on the Olympic roster. They went to the Western Conference Finals. Watch them be back.
He was on the Olympic roster bench.
I mean, he was the highest scoring player on the Olympic roster until the last 3 games when they needed points. When Steph Curry decided to be the guy.
Yeah, because Steph Curry was struggling all Olympics. The USA team limped through the first half, and then Steph Curry caught fire.
Without a doubt, but they didn't lose.
They didn't lose, yeah.
And then
there's no way Karl Anthony Towns is not the best player on the T-Wolves team last year.
I think Anthony Edwards was the guy last year. 100%.
Crazy.
And so on top of that, I think the hotter part of this is that the Lakers will be the team playing them. Yeah. You have, I think,
no way.
So they've been consistently a play-in team the last 3-4 years, which 9th, 10th seed, they have to play at least 1 or 2 games to get into the playoffs themselves.
Who did the T-Wolves beat to get to wherever they got last year? Who'd they beat?
The Denver Nuggets.
And why did they beat the Denver Nuggets?
The Denver Nuggets beat the Lakers.
No, but why did they beat? Why were the Wolves actually able to beat the Nuggets, who cannot be beat by anybody?
I mean, they went out there and
because their roster aligned perfectly, and the reason why it aligned perfectly was because of Karl Anthony Towns. He was the versatile player that could go on and take on Jokic.
You got Gobert to defend him, and now you have Naz Reid to take over that defensive take.
Whatever.
Karl Anthony Towns.
We will wait. That is not a good take.
When I'm wrong on this in 6 months, you can come back at me and yell at me. But
all right, my hot take. So last week you did a political one, so I said I would do a political one this week. 2-part system isn't broken.
2-party system?
2-party system is not broken. It's working exactly as it was designed to work.
Really?
And what that means is it's designed to keep outsiders out, and it's designed to keep the power centralized.
I mean,
that's my take.
That's a fair point. But at the same time, okay, so we can go back and look at do a little history lesson. So you go back, and our first president, the great George Washington, was the man he was a proponent of not having political parties.
Yeah.
Because he saw the dangers how it could become so centralized. And then for the first couple presidencies, there was largely a one-party system. There was kind of the Federalists, but largely it was the Democratic Republicans. And it wasn't until Andrew Jackson effectively came around with what is now the Democratic Party and put that effective second party up there. So you think that it is doing its job to keep outsiders out?
Okay, so I think all you have to go do present day is just look at RFK. Look at what happened to the guy.
Sure.
He gets ousted by his party. He runs as an independent. So then his party fights against him.
Yeah, directly now.
Directly fights against him and pushes him to the point where he has to withdraw from presidency and goes into supporting Trump.
Which is something I think a year ago no one would have seen happening.
Right. And that's simply because the two-party system has all the power.
Yeah.
And it has pushed people. And they tried to get rid of Trump, but Trump was a little bit too big. They could not. The Republican Party could not get rid of Trump.
Whether it's 8 years ago or this spring, take your pick.
So it is doing its job, and we can see in real life that the only way that it can be beat is when you have somebody that is big enough, that makes enough of a disruption, like Trump has done, to break through it. Because I think if you go to some Republicans, they would not be happy with that choice.
Yeah, and at the very least, even if he hasn't broken the two-party mold,
I don't think he's broken the two-party system.
But he has drastically shifted the Republican Party from where it was 9 years ago to now.
Yeah.
It's a completely different party.
Interesting to see what the identity of the Republican Party is after Trump.
Yeah, regardless who wins 4 years and now, it'll be interesting to see what direction it goes.
Yep, those are our hot takes today. Interesting stuff.
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. We're going to have a special, on Thursday, we're going to have a special segment.
Yeah.
So we'll have a hot takes on Tuesday, and then Thursday morning, we're going to be having a battle of the donuts.
You're right. It's going to be...
Find out the best donut in town.
We're going to go to a couple of the most notable donut places here in Minot. We're going to get a couple...
I mean, the only two.
Yeah, the two good... Yeah, realistically, the two best ones. And we're going to go through a couple more popular choices of donuts. We're going to test them out here live, and we're going to see which one's best.
Yep. We'll be going maple bars, testing maple bars, and we'll be testing Bavarian cream. So one filled and one non.
Yep. And it's going to be, I look forward to it. You're going to watch us make a mess of ourselves.
We're hoping that this leads into a ongoing series where we begin to create other battles of trying out different things around town.
And if you want us to try anything, make sure you comment. Let us know down below.
Don't make sure it's not too spicy, because then I'm probably out.
Yeah, I'll win, but I will fully regret it later.
Maybe one day we'll go... No, we won't do anything with Lutefisk. You guys said that, maybe we'll get Jonathan to eat Lutefisk on air.
Next year at the Hustfest, we'll do something. It'll be fun.
That's not a thing. So, any closing words for you?
I am all set. I had a great time. I look forward to Thursday. I thank Travis for being here.
Yep.
And I think this was a great episode.
Thursday at 8 a.m., we will be back bright and early. With some donuts. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. 75% of the people that watch our videos are not subscribed. Be part of the 25%. Support us. It makes our job so much more fun.
Exactly.
So, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.